Nigerians and Indians were both colonized by the British. But the Indians rejected the British culture. They rejected the British religion.
How many factories have been built by our Indian returnees? They told me 900.
As a Congolese, every time I read Made in China, my mind tells me this is fake. And when I see Made in India, it tells me this is original.
What you saw just now was testimony of India's growing influence, especially on the continent of Africa. Namaste guys, welcome to your own channel Indian Geopolitics. By now it's a certainty that the 21st century will be remembered as India's century because of the rising geopolitical and geo-economic stature of India, the emergence of an aggressive China and Cold War 2.0 between the United States and China. Many multinational manufacturing companies have started shifting their manufacturing base from China to India. However, given the geographical location of India, it is inevitable that India will have to have an economic relationship with Africa. As per every global estimate, India is the fastest large growing economy. India was ranked 10th globally in terms of its economic size in year 2014 and has surpassed countries like Russia, Italy, Brazil, France, England to become the 5th largest economy, and within coming 2 to 3 years will surpass Germany and Japan to become the world's 3rd largest economy. Africa will be a direct or indirect beneficiary of rising economic stature of India, and it is clearly visible from the economic statistics. Today, India has invested more than $100 billion in Africa, is one of the largest trading partner of Africa, and will have more than $200 billion trade with Africa by 2030. For a moment, if we just ignore the economic aspects, Indian diaspora is present across the African continent and has been contributing in the economic rise of Africa. This was recently admitted by the Ugandan president in the Non-Alignment Movement Summit, as you can hear.
And the other day I was asking our people, how many factories have been built by our Indian returnees? They told me 900 factories they had built since they came back.
Indians are present in different economic sectors of multiple countries across Africa and are directly responsible for generation of multiple economic opportunities for the local Africans. However, economy is not the only aspect that will strengthen the India-Africa relationship. Even history is playing its role. Both India and Africa were colonized for more than 200 years and thus had mutual understanding and sympathy for each other. However, one of the most important things that amazes Africa about India is the fact that India has not abandoned its civilizational past, its cultural practices, its vast heritage. Or rather, I would say India was successful enough in protecting its civilizational identity, unlike Africa, which lost it due to the regressive colonization by different European powers. Today, much of the Africa has lost its own historical identity. This was expressed by a well-known African scholar Thao Haramanuba in this video.
And then we have the Nigerians, that is us Africans, accepted the British culture, the British dress code, the British food, the British every religion, and rejected the British technology. Now that is where the Indians are the most advanced.
He explains how Indians were smart enough to accept only those aspects of the colonial power which will help India in becoming a developed nation economically in longer run, while the African nations completely abandoned their historical heritage and became mental slaves of the colonial power by adopting their way of life, but abandoning the modern ideas that could have helped these African nations to develop as a modern nations in 21st century. Before we dwell into his reasons of supporting India, I would request you to like, subscribe and share your own channel Indian Geopolitics.
Nigerians and Indians were both colonized by the British. But the Indians rejected the British culture. They rejected the British religion. They rejected the British food. They rejected the British way of doing things and hold on to the British technology. You know,
In 21st century, powers like United States, China and Europe have once again started staring at Africa as a cheap source of natural resources for future technology and have started neocolonizing these nations in form of debt trap diplomacy, coercive diplomacy, or using migrant policy to subdue these nations. However, India has altogether followed a different path to have its own influence on African nations. India has made it clear that with rising economic stature of India, it will ensure even Africa is beneficiary of this economic rise. India's Ministry of Foreign Affairs Dr. S. Jaishankar clearly stated India's policy during the NAM conference in Uganda.
The world will not be multipolar, the world will not be truly diverse, the world will not have a true sense of participation and ownership if 54 countries of the world are left out of the manner in which the world is discussed and run. And for us, when we became independent, there was a widespread feeling that India's independence was not complete till Africa got its independence. Today, I would say our growth and prosperity will also not complete until we see that Africa too has got what is rightfully theirs.
Even if for a moment we keep this political dialogue buzzy aside and look directly at the experiences of Africans themselves, we can see that Africans trust India more than any other countries. Have a look at this small clip.
As a Congolese, every time I read Made in China, my mind tells me this is fake. And when I see Made in India, it tells me this is original.
This fellow African can clearly be seen having more faith in India-made products rather than China. This itself is a testimony of how India's rise will benefit Africa directly. I would like to know your comments on how India can further assist Africa in overcoming its economic, political and social crisis. Mention it in comment section. Stay tuned to know more. Like, subscribe and share your own channel Indian Geopolitics. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.